Games, board games. We might be talking about board games, but we're not gonna shout. In fact, we're talking about games that are played at speed. I'm not saying this is something that we need because it's a weird thing to talk about needing entertainment, but I believe that it will help us in our life, and I think that this will be something we can analyze, and we might now put it under the knife. Speed games, it's what we're talking about. Speed games with a bit of strategy, and I'm not gonna shout. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. 10 a.m. ish UK time, time for Busy Beats and Board Game Leather. And episode 797, we are pondering real time strategic games featuring the lovely Fabricio Leotti. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Beth.
And you are here because you have just launched the Kickstarter. So, if people don't know about this, this is a real time strategic board game. And you presumably knew that this was something a little bit different. What made you want to do a strategic real time board game?
Yeah, exactly. So Hyperwars is a very strategic game and is a real-time game as well. So I mean, you need to think fast and on your feet. Take make a decision-making process like super intense and fast. So yeah, I really like speed games, even if they are like not so strategic. But I enjoy speed games in a general way as well, of course, in general manner. And yeah, and Hyperwars is there. We have a campaign live, and yeah,
And what made you want to do this? What's inspired you to do a strategic speed game?
nice. I love strategy games as well, of course, even if they don't are speed games. And this means that when I first created Hyperwars, I really wanted to give people something to think because one of the points of the game is actually being a little bit stressful. So the game is very rushed and having to think about several things at once and on a fast-paced manner, it's very stressful. So
So it was all
so that's
coming
that
and trying
inspired me.
to instigate the feeling of stress and excitement and pushing that to the foreground.
Exactly, because when you play Hyperwars, you are acting like a corporation, one of those like a cyberpunk types of corporations, and you have competition coming towards you. So the feeling I wanted to give is that you're gonna feel stressed that you don't know exactly what your opponents are doing, and how can you counteract that if you don't really know,
Mhm.
and if you can do this in a timely fashion. So all of that was what I was trying to capture when I did it.
And if that sounds something interesting, then go and check that out right now. Let's talk a wee bit about some of our recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights. So recent highlights, I've been exploring a little bit possibilities of how to keep my business going, self-publishing when I move away. I had a bit of a business meeting, which turns out that yes, it won't work with this particular person, but thank you for the advice. And there's only basically two fulfillment agencies in the UK that I'm going to really explore their options. We'll see how it works. And I need to arrange more meetings to find someone to, because it would be a shame if I had to stop publishing when I left the UK. Um, the other thing is, I went out and I played some wonderful games. One of them was a bit Halloweeny, King of New York. And hello, Board Game Grand. It is lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us live. This is friend Board Game Grand. This is my friend Fabricio Leotti. Um,
Hello.
pl- Played King of New York. Big monsters smashing into each other with some of the Halloween monsters there, just to give it a Halloween flavor. We played Hand Build L, which is a big, meaty two-player word game that I don't often get the chance to play because it's a big, meaty two-player word game. And yeah, the opportunities for that don't always come up. We played the What's Not Cabinet, a game by Dr. Finn, published and developed by Edo Baraf, art by Beth Sobel. This is beautiful. Playing, you've got to match the items this way, match the colors this way. Each item has one of 5 colors, and there's different ways that you draft. Have you played that yourself, Fabricio?
No, I haven't, but just listening to you talking about it sounds really interesting.
It is a delightful game, and I think that Dr. Finn has a really good design sense, and this is no exception. Everything is super on point. We also played a whole bunch of my own games. Wibble, speed word game, Trip Hill, one of the contest entries for this year, matching stuff. A game about quickly grabbing cards and judging them against free descriptions, which is exactly like it sounds. And Repeatable, which is a memory story game, and Alphabetical. And so it was a lovely evening, meeting with friends and cycling a bit over an hour to get over there, which is a good cycle. So sometimes after I moved away, I don't always feel up to it, but when I do, I always have a good time. So Fabricio, have you been up to anything except
Yes.
and Board Game Grand wants to say, I own Whatnot, but haven't had the chance to play it. Fan of Edo Baraf and Beth Sobel. Yeah, they are wonderfully talented people. So yes, Fabricio, what have you been up to?
All right. So I've been up to this beauty right there, the campaign for sure. But more specifically, lately I've been looking a lot into like shipping costs and fulfillment, this kind of stuff. This is really tricky to get right, and also things are very expensive nowadays. But I've been getting very good deals, and I probably will be able to like reduce the price for shipment during the campaign. So I will update the page with like new values and stuff. What else did I do? I did something that I don't do much more these days. I went to the office, so I have a day job and I normally work from home. But yesterday I went to the office and it's in the city street, sorry, in the city center, very close to the city center in Stockholm. So it was very nice to like walk on the city center streets and see. Um, October, November here, weather-wise, is not really interesting. It's always like raining and overcast, but still, it's very nice to like be outside a little bit and see people and like go to the places and have lunch outside, except for having lunch in my place. Like, yeah, it's been really interesting stuff. Um, what else? I have played a little bit of Cyberpunk 2077, one of my favorite games. I mean, it must be no secret for now that by now that I love Cyberpunk theme. So yeah, and I love this game so much. So I have been playing it a little bit.
And I mean, what are your emotions like right now? Because I think this, except for myself, when I've launched a Kickstarter and sometimes I even launched them right on air, this is the closest I've ever had to someone having just launched their Kickstarter and then come onto the show. So are you willing to open up and tell us like what's going through your, is it going as you expected? How are you feeling?
Yeah. So yesterday I referred to that as okay. It's time to get on the Kickstarter roller coaster and enjoy the ride because exactly like how it feels. So it's a lot of feelings come from all over the place. So this morning I couldn't sleep basically this night. I went to bed like 5 a.m. or something, and I was up again like 8. And I'm super anxious, and I was very like scared that I couldn't send my initial emails because I had some trouble in the morning with the system I'm using to send the emails, and then it got solved, so I got happy. And then even before I sent the emails, I saw some people backing the game, and I saw someone going to Facebook and telling me first backer just reporting in, and then this is so amazing. And then this guy is like a really cool guy. I met him in one of the conventions, and he simply loved the game, and he was the first one to back. So all these feelings they are very overwhelming, that's for sure.
Mm-mm.
Uh, but inside I'm just jumping up and down. My exterior is kind of okay. I stay put. I move my hands a lot, but not much more than that. But inside I'm just jumping up and down. It's crazy.
And hello and good morning, Odolani. It is lovely to see you, and I hope that you are
Welcome.
well. One thing I will say, yes, although it doesn't show on this screen because I'm sharing a screen on Chrome where I am not logged into anything, as opposed to Firefox where I am logged into everything, but then I close that so that my laptop doesn't stall when I'm streaming, if I remember. But yeah, I have backed this project already myself, and if it sounds exciting, then please do back it. Even like if you're like, oh, I'm not sure if I want it, but I do want more speed games to exist, and I encourage you all to back it for a wee bit. But it's, yeah, I've not played it myself. I can't say anything about the from first-hand experience the quality of the game, but it does sound really good. Like everything that I've read sounds incredibly well developed, and I'm really excited to have a go of it as soon as I possibly can.
Nice. Let's make it happen, Beth. Let's make it happen.
And you, one thing I wanted to say to you, Fabricio, is it is good practice. I know it has just launched, but make sure to reply to all the comments because the more
Yeah, I will.
activity that there
Yeah.
is in their, the more Kickstarter might push it up.
No,
And
that's for sure. Yeah.
um, Board Game Grand says, I just backed it to believe in it as I'm on a board game buying ban. Hopefully that will help a little. 100%. I think that it helps the algorithm
Thank you
and
so
everything.
much. You have
Um,
already helped a lot for sure.
and yeah, we need to get to make this happen. It needs to get to 10 grand. And well, I'm converting it from UK. So the original thing is, I mean, this is
Swedish kronor.
Swedish. Yeah. So um, we are, a bit less than 10% of the way, but it's just fun launched. Like we are talking literally basically 1 hour. Was it bang on nine that you managed to launch this?
Yeah. It's yeah, like about 1 hour now, right now. Yeah.
And so like this could still like, fund within like the first couple of days, which would how amazing would
Yes.
that
Let's
be?
hope so. Yeah.
And like I'm just yeah, is there anything else you can tell us about your emotional state?
Sorry. About what? I didn't get it.
Your emotional state, how you're feeling.
Yeah. So I'm also feeling very grateful having seen people like this coming to me and saying, "Okay, I love the game. I have been waiting for it to come back to Kickstarter," or someone that has played it on a convention or in a friend local game store. It's like in the end, that's the real reason I do this. I mean, I want to bring this kind of feeling to people. Because I feel this a lot when I play someone else's game. I'm very grateful to a lot of designers, to a lot of people in this industry that I don't know have given me a lot of joy and a lot of good moments. So yeah, if I can retribute this to the community, this is like just amazing.
Awesome, and I think that, yeah, there's going to be a lot of emotions. I'm not going to press the issue too much, but let's start getting to the main topic. And I would like to talk about a brilliant thing, what's a little thing which is brilliant. I want to talk about why I believe that speed strategic games are inherently a brilliant thing. I believe that speed, when you don't have to when you've got it can add some time pressure, it can add some feeling of extra excitement, it can add some feeling of okay, I don't need to wait for other people. It can eliminate boredom by having that time aspect. But by being a strategic game, what you ideally want is a game where it's not just about doing the things as fast as possible. This is not set or grapple or jungle speed, where the whole point is just a performance based. It's not about just doing the thing, you know exactly what you're doing, just do it as fast as possible. There's a little bit of thinking. And hopefully, like any good strategy game, you will have to think situationally. This time that I'm playing, maybe I want to get some sheep. Next time that I'm playing, maybe I want to sell my sheep. I don't know. I mean, there's no speed strategy game that this applies to, but there should be. And that's the thing. Why do people assume that a strategy game is going to be turn-based? It makes sense because that is the easier way to do things. But what is brilliant about strategic speed games, Fabricio? And everyone else, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So indeed, speed strategic games are brilliant for many reasons. One of them being, I think it's a very interesting way to teach yourself how to think through situations of like very much stress or that you need to act very quickly. So these types of games, for me, they are more related to like training yourself than many other games, than turn-based games. Of course, turn-based games also teaches you a lot of things, and that's for sure. But as far as games goes, games go as a way to train ourselves to improve on something without really taking like a full-blown risk, I think speed games are awesome because they are the real thing. It's not like
it reflects real life a little bit more because you can't just pause and wait for as long as you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hello, Dusty. It is always lovely to have you join. And Dusty says, real life is the worst real-time strategic game I've ever played, but I am good at it. 41 years and I haven't died once yet. And hopefully you won't die for a long time to come. And I think this ties into what you're saying. Like in life, if you say, I mean, sure, I don't have to reply to your email right this instant, and some of life it is, but if I wait, 3 weeks to reply to the email, then things will have happened. Maybe I'm pitching a game to a publisher and then I take too long to reply and I don't think fast enough, and then they decide, well, this person isn't worth dealing with. All the time has an impact. Sometimes it's a case of, well, if someone doesn't reply, then they go with someone else because some other opportunity comes up. If life was a return-based game, says Dusty, merging into traffic wouldn't be life-threatening. I love that.
But probably would take a lot longer than it already takes.
And Board Game Gran, Escape the Curse of the Temple. Yes, that is one of the games that I'm going to talk about. Do we have any other things to say about the brilliance of real-time strategy games?
I was just wanted to mention that I also think Life is a real-time game, and it's super cool. The only thing I don't like is that it contains player elimination. I don't like games with player elimination, so that goes for Life as well.
Yeah, that's very sad, especially in Life. I mean, I had to celebrate, commiserate, anyway. But not a few months ago, that was sad. But yeah, I mean, we have to appreciate, obviously, the players who are still there. And of course, as you say, that's a nice thing about the game, that, there will be another game that you play with those people. But in real life, of course, that is the end.
Yeah.
Now, as always, I want to encourage everyone watching to please continue commenting and asking questions. That is why I do these things real time. And I never edit or whatever, because this allows me to engage with you all, and it is lovely. Also, follow if you want to do that. The way I'm going to do it is we're going to go through a lot of games. I thought we'd have a quick look at what's there. We talk about maybe why we want to see more of these, what problems there are with real-time strategic games, and how we might overcome those problems, and maybe some of the lessons that we've both learned along the way. Because I myself have, since we last spoke, like several months ago, I have made something. Fuse. I don't have my Fuse on this list, so maybe you can tell us a little bit more about Fuse later on. And Odilani says, if you sit at your checkers thinking on your move for 3 weeks, then that's not great. And this is an interesting point, okay? Because in theory, every game does have a point of real-time aspect to it that you are constrained by the social dynamic. Would you agree?
Yes, I think so too. Yeah, I mean, it's every game in the end can be, I guess, sped up a little bit. So going a bit outside the board game universe, we have a lot of people that play video games in this speeding through, right? So there is a whole class of players that just want to play the speed up version of something, just finishing a game super quickly. So yeah. I think you're muted, Beth.
Yes, I was. I think that also the other thing I want to point out is that any game can be made into a real time game by adding a chess clock. Obviously, in a tournament, you have to add some sort of time constraint. I mean, you can't just be working on this game forever. So, at a professional level for a Go champion, a game might take potentially a day or even 2 days because they want to study these moves for such a long time, and this might be this epic battle between two people. More commonly, it might be listed so that it takes maybe an hour or so. Um, and the other thing I want to say is hyper hyper speed chess. Have you seen in Spiel there are two players who are playing with one another with 1 minute each on the clock? They play literally, I think they played literally 600 plus games when I saw them last on Sunday at Spiel.
Wow.
So they're playing these games frantically. I'm sure they take breaks at certain points. I mean, I hope they take breaks to actually eat. But every time I passed by, they were there playing a game, and then they take maybe 10 seconds to say good game, and then they start again, slam the clocks, arrange things, and then it's almost like a dexterity game because you've got to move the thing and then slam the timer before you do your. It's ridiculous. And I actually played a couple of non-real time games last weekend with a friend, just putting a chess clock timer with 1 minute. We found out we actually ran out of time with 1 minute each, but with 2 minutes each, we could actually finish the game, and it was super exciting because if you spend too long, then obviously you're going to run out of time. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about something where you learn the rules and then you play it to like, where is the line? Is that a speed game? Is it not? And quick hello to Bones. Topic on the bottom. And yeah, what do you think? What's the line of what is a speed game and what's not?
Yeah, that's a very tricky question. I agree that you don't make a speed game just by adding a clock. It gets more fast, of course, but it's not really necessarily a speed game because of that. I think that a speed game needs to have some component that actually requires speed in itself, even if you don't have a clock. So, for example, competing to do something faster than other players, for example, or while you finish a task, something else is happening, and it only stops happening when you finish the task. For example, Captain Sonar has some stuff like this that you need to finish a task while your submarine is, I think, yeah, outside the water. Then you can only submerge again after you finish the task, for example. And during that time, the other team has some advantages to find you and bomb you, of course. So, yeah, I mean, I think the game has to have this sort of elements where speeding up will give you some advantage. It's not just like time related, but also like having more stuff done, for example. Like in Hyperwars, if you play faster, you get more action done, and if you get
Yeah.
more action done, you have advantages on facing the
And
others.
Dusty wants an actual analysis of how tabletop games can work with a speed mode. I mean, the simplest method is just adding a speed clock and saying you get 1 minute for your thinking, I get 1 minute for my thinking, and if either of us spend more than this amount of time, then too bad. There is also the Fisher time and Buyomi time, where it's like a chess clock, but then they add a few seconds each time you play, which can be very interesting. But there are a lot of other ways to do it, and I would like to carry on through the possible ways. So let me share the screen, and let's start off with Pit. Now, it's arguable whether this is a strategic game or not, but for those who don't know Pit, you've got a hand of cards, and you're saying, trade one, and then someone trades one with you, and you say, oh, trade four, and then you trade 4 of your cards for 4 of theirs. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a set of all the same card. There are other cards that do special things, but you're trying to trade as quickly as you can. And the more times you trade, there isn't just a, okay, I'm definitely going to trade with that person, but maybe you might be thinking, well, I don't want to trade with that person. Because I've traded with them so many times, I'm going to trade with that person to get something new. You might be trying to keep track of what your possibilities are. If you had 3 of one kind and that was your biggest set, but you are not able to get the other 4, maybe you think, well, maybe someone else is going for this. Maybe I want to keep one of them back until the end, but maybe I want to switch into something else and totally switch into, because you need to be doing something that no one else is going for. And so there is a lot of luck in Pit. I think it's so chaotic that it kind of takes a lot of the strategy out. But yeah, any thoughts on this one? So Pit, who has played Pit? Fabricio, you are muted.
I was indeed, yeah. I haven't played Pit, no, but yeah, but it feels like it has some strategy on it for sure. For example, as you said, deciding like who we want to trade with next and so on. But I don't know. It sounds to me like it's more about like the chaos to make it like confusing,
Yes.
and by having it confusing, it this is the challenge, right? Try to overcome the confusion and then doing what's better for you, I think.
Because in some ways you have to almost reduce the chaos, because yeah, board game Grand makes a really interesting point. Like, speed games are something that you play as fast as possible, probably just doing one thing, and real-time strategy, you have to maybe think about more things, but maybe not as fast as possible. Like, there's maybe some benefits for being a little bit slower, but doing the things more accurately.
Yeah, that's a great point actually, because in real time strategic games, playing slow might be a valid and good strategy for you, depending on where you are during the game. For example, you don't have to actually play as fast as you can. That's true.
What's about when you tell players with analysis paralysis that you've got 1 minute left? Sure, that counts, but obviously don't do that unless everyone has previously agreed. And yes, some versions of this come with a bell, some don't. But let's keep going. Actually, I want to go to my game next, which is also the least strategic of these games. This is the back of the card for a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your radishes. There's also a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your turnips, and a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your beetroots. The thing about these games is that, yes, they are very performance based. It is very much based on, is this creature totally different? If so, then I can put it on top. Is this creature totally different? If so, then yes, put it on top. So there's no strategy there. It's about quick thinking, but it's not strategic. But then the only one decision that you make is, do I take this vegetable? Yes or no? Because a vegetable allows you to then, a vegetable can go on any creature and any creature can go on a vegetable. So it allows you to, if you're struggling to find a creature that's totally different, you can go vegetable, creature, vegetable, creature. But if you have more than 5, you lose the game. So it's not necessarily advantageous to grab all 5 at the start, because then you can't sort yourself out of a jam at the end. But you don't necessarily want to leave all of them until the end, because if you haven't grabbed all your vegetables, then that means that you've spent a little bit more time going through. So I think that it does push itself slightly above being a pure speed game because of that one tiny decision. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, sure. What is the time constraint when the game ends?
Oh, it because everyone else is grabbing at the same time.
Aha, okay. The cards are
So
on the table and everyone is just grabbing cards, or
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So I mean, fundamentally, I mean, with time constraints, you can have either um, other people are the end is player driven, like maybe when people deplete some resources, you could have it when there's some timer there. I mean, I'm sure there must be other ways of doing it, but I can't think of them, like other than having a timer outside the game and saying this is when it finishes. Or actually, let's get to the Camelot lightning system. This is really, really interesting. um so where's Camelot? So I want to talk about Camelot. This is a little known game which is wonderful. So Tom Jolly designed a whole bunch of games, and in this what happens is two people are taking their turn at the same time. And when you're taking your turn, you have a marker in front of you, and you can take as long as you want on your turn. But the other marker is still moving. So if the marker would be going to you, instead it jumps over. And this is such a beautiful system. It kind
It's
of works
brilliant.
even with 3 players. I think that with more players it works better. And there's definitely time as a resource. And I think the interesting thing here is that it starts getting into the games where you don't need to be as fast as possible. Being as fast as possible is not the point. As long as you're fast enough to stay ahead of the other, marker coming up and chasing you. Like if the other marker's there, you've got this much time. And that allows you to relax a little bit and play into the strategy. Because when you're moving your units, it's a war game. And this is a front cover, very comedic, very ridiculous. There's a whole bunch of people called Lancelot. You know, and there's a whole bunch of people who are basically, the idea is that anyone could have drawn the fancy sword Excalibur, and you just need to be the first person to get there. Everyone's heard about it, and there's like everyone's got one person that could be the person to grab the sword because it's apparently a very common name. And then you've got wizards who are casting spells. And the other thing I like about this is that because only 2 people are taking their turn at once, there's going to be at least one person who, yes, are thinking, but are also looking at what's happening on the board and kind of making sure that it's legal. So, what do you think of this system? Is this something that you might be inspired to use? Because I almost feel like it could work in a lot of relatively simple turn-based games. Just rather than only having one person take a turn at once, have 2 people take a turn at once. And rather than this time being once this resource has been depleted or once this timer has gone, it's just like any other game. You win once you've gotten the sword, once you've achieved the objective. Thoughts on this
Yeah.
system?
Yeah, the system of Camelot is definitely brilliant. I have heard about it before. I think we have discussed that before, you and I. And it's like, yeah, it's really brilliant. One aspect that I think it shines through is exactly this catch up thing. If the two things go to the same player, stuff happens. And one game that I believe does something quite related to it is called 5 minute chase. So it has to do with it's more or less the same thing, but with the difference that one player is trying to escape and the other one is trying to catch them. So there's a chase, and then if the two markers are in the same street tile, then the thing is finished. But you build the street as you go, and after the game ends, you can come back and check if the route you make was valid, and if it was nice, then you win the game. You catch the. It's really cool. So it reminds me a bit of Camelot as well. Yeah, exactly this one.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And I do like 5 Minute Chase. I actually got to copy myself and I completely forgot about this one. It is 2-player only, which is an interesting thing. Certainly, when you go into the 2-player game space, there's a lot you can do that you can't do in the 3, 4, 5 minutes game space. And what else? Rush MD and Kitchen Rush. So both of these are by Dave Turksey, and I played Rush MD when it was being prototyped. And again, this is a system that it's all about slowing you down. So yes, there's a timer. Yes, you need to do these things as fast as possible. But how do we make sure that making the right decision is better than just doing the thing super, super fast, right? So that's the question that's kind of at the heart of all the strategic games, strategic speed games. And the way that Kitchen Rush does this, and also Pendulum now, I think about it, is by having these timers, and you can only use those timers like as units that are essentially each time you put a timer in a place, you get that effect. It's like worker placements. You put it somewhere and you get that effect. But you can't just go boom, 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 and have like one new thing as fast as your fingers can possibly process it. You've got to wait the 30 seconds. So, frankly, spending 30 seconds and doing an action that's terrible is worse than spending 35 seconds and doing the correct action. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, completely. Yeah, it gives you this feeling that it's taking forever now. So like 30 seconds doing the wrong thing takes like a huge amount of time. So yeah, I agree. It's crazy.
Mm-mm. And so I wanted to show my own game, a game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergies, which is a drafting game. And this one was heavily inspired by another drafting game where people were taking turns, and it was the turn of the person to the left of me, and I'd already decided what I was going to do on my next turn. Hello, Xate. It is lovely to see you. And
Hello.
the reason that I made this game was to kind of say, well, I want to add some speed aspect to it. And what if we have some way of doing it, some encouragement to do it faster? And there's nothing to slow you down. There's just a bunch of 9 cards on the middle of the table, and you need to grab items. You might need to grab nature based things. You might need to grab a bunch of creatures. And each of these creatures give you points for other things. So, like the band leader gives you points for having musical notes in the pictures of other stuff. And Hungry Horace will give you points for a cake. So if you had Marie Kondo there who's holding a cake, then Hungry Horace would get points. And whilst there's nothing to slow you down, so the entire game can take probably less than 3 minutes, and maybe even faster once you've played it a few times, I would say that it does feel like you have to make meaningful decisions. And the way I try to push that is by having massive variance. It is all about the synergies. If you have Marie Kondo and 6 items in your hand, that's obviously ridiculous, let alone if you've got Bezzy Basher and 6 items. And the creatures that give you an 8 score are obviously good, but there's nothing that's just, this is always good. Everything is contextual. I mean, light work is great. Every 2 hands is 1 point, but then you need to actually get stuff. And so, yeah, it's by making things contextual, then you can sort of increase the thought process that goes into it, I feel.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that Hyperwars used to have a contextual element, and in the end, I have to take it out because it was too much to think about. But one of the first iterations of the game, the action cards, they were actually double-sided, and the side you would play facing up would be the action you were executing. but it was very hard for someone playing Hyperwars like to have to check the back of the card, the back and front of the card all the time. So it became too big of a hurdle, and then I eventually removed this mechanism. But I think it having context in a real time or strategic game is super good, and it can be a very good example of how you prevent people from doing what they want, and then they need to like go around and try to find out ways to do it.
I think, frankly, the key thing is just like any other strategy game, that
Hmm.
if the same move is always the best move, then it ceases to be an interesting strategy game. I mean, um, all, every, yeah, I don't think I need to explain that anymore. Escape Curse of the Temple. So you're rolling a bunch of dice, and then you get to activate things, and this is again very low on this how strategic it is, and there's a little bit of dexterity. How fast can you roll these dice? And there is a little bit of strategy of, okay, am I going to go there? Am I going to give up on these things? Because there's kind of like a Yahtzee style element where, yes, you can keep re-rolling them as fast as you want, but which one am I going to go to? So like there's a slight opportunistic aspect to this. Um, I also think it's really interesting how Escape Curse of the Temple, it gives you breaks. There are points where everything stops for just a moment. You need to be
Yeah.
in a safe haven. And this is a key thing, because actually playing at full speed, I mean, sure, in Fabricio's game, you might be waiting for a card from your neighbor, or in a game with a timer, you might be waiting for things to come down. But if you're playing at full speed and you always need to be on, then doing it for more than 5 minutes is actually really tiring and exhausting.
Yes. Yeah. It is indeed.
Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I will say Space Alert, where this is a cooperative one. And the interesting thing is, again, to separate out the real time of, okay, we're all going to do this, we're all going to listen, we're all going to prepare ourselves and put people where they need to be and work out what needs to happen. And then you have a little bit of a soundtrack. It tells you what has to happen, and then you've got a limited amount of time. You need to, boom, react to these dangers all around you. And by the end of that timer, then you spend a bit of like 2 minutes going through everything and
Yeah.
say, okay, now the enemy attacks us. Now what happens? Okay, we are safe here. Now this other
Yeah.
thing attacks us. Okay, we're not safe there. Okay, that happens. And at this point, oh no, that happened. And so it's almost like
I
programming mixed with, yeah, that foresight. What were you about to say? I do apologize.
Yeah, I really think that this game has two very interesting things for me as a designer, like to observe happening. One is planning at speed, which is not something easy to do. I mean, you really need to like think your movements through, and sometimes when you're cooperating, doing this at speed is very hard. And the second thing is being able to think backwards, because you were planning in one direction and then you're executing what you did in the opposite direction in this game. So
Mm, 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 mm.
this is really a brilliant idea. I think it's super cool.
And it's by one of the most talented designers around,
Yeah,
let's be
exactly,
honest.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
And Blood
that's
of
completely.
Battle, also designer of Bunny Bunny Moose Moose, Code Names, which is obviously done
Yeah,
incredibly well. Dungeon Pets, Dungeon Lords, many, many more.
yeah. It's one of
And
my favorite designers for sure.
I would like to ask people in the crowd, do you know other things? Because the only other one, and that's why, no, sure, it turns out I missed a couple. I missed out Pendulum, which we could talk about, which uses a very similar mechanism to Kitchen Rush and Rush MD. I assume that
Yeah.
Stegmeyer was inspired by Turksy here.
There's there is also Magic Maze. I love Magic Maze. It's
Oh,
a
of course. again, another game that I've got myself, and how could
Yeah.
I forget about that? This is,
Yeah.
and the very interesting thing about Magic Maze is that you don't have a specific amount of time. You've got a timer, but at certain points you can flip the timer the other way. And so you need to kind of have one of your people ready to be there. And for those who don't know, Magic Maze, you're not controlling a character. Everyone is controlling all the characters, but I might have the ability to make them go down and left. Fabricio might have the ability to make them go up and right. And yeah, it's you're trying to do all these things, and like, why aren't you moving that there? So, like, if we need them to go there, then we kind of all need to orchestrate our plans together. And there's something really lovely and cooperative about that.
But it's amazing because you cannot speak, you cannot communicate while you're playing the game. You can only use. There is this huge red pawn that you can maybe use to call someone's attention, but you cannot point to the board and you cannot speak or express with your voice or with your mouth what the other should be doing. So it's so amazing. I mean, it really pressure you to take the right decision, and it has a very interesting component of real-time games, which is attention. You need to pay attention to that. There's no way you can only pay attention to your game. It's not something like that, because in this sense it's the opposite of Hyperwars. In Hyperwars you normally only pay attention to your game. Only advanced players can actually take the time and understand what the others are doing. But in Magic Maze is the opposite. You need to pay attention to everyone the whole time, and it's so hard.
And we've got some shouts out. We've already had a shout out for Flatline and Fuse. I've not played either of these, but I will definitely be looking them up. I get the impression that these ones are, Fuse is. I feel like Magic Maze is also quite low on the strategic side, and it's interesting to consider Space Alert. Like, is that actually a strategic game, or is it just a performance-based game where it's deliberately obfuscated? It kind of reminds me of Bunny Moose Moose, where yes, you need to work out these things, and there is a lot of challenge, but ultimately there is one correct answer, and it's just who is going to arrive at that one correct answer first. It's kind of like set.
I would definitely put it more on the incomplete information section there. I think this is exactly like that. So you don't know exactly what is coming after the next move. So you kind of need to plan in a more flexible way that you can adjust in the future. But I agree, it's more like, especially because it's when I played Space Alert, it was with a soundtrack. So it's kind of always the same. Of course, you can have different soundtracks, but it's more or less the same. And I think it's one of the games that would benefit a lot from having a mobile app, for example. So you could have different setups and things mixed, and this would make probably the game more strategic, I think.
I am going to kind of potentially be controversial and say that I've decided right now, in the past minutes, that Space Alert isn't a strategic game. I think that it's a performance-based game. I'm not saying it's a bad game. I think there's a lot of thought involved in playing it, but fundamentally, I think that I'm going to say my kind of my bar is to basically say, if you have an extra couple of minutes to ponder what you could possibly do, would it be trivial? And when I look at Kitchen Rush, it's not always super obvious. I could play that game and have like a bit more time and study board, and even I could have a discussion with someone of what is actually the best thing to do. But Space Alert, it's been a while since I played it, but the thing that makes it tricky isn't that you're unsure what to do. The thing that makes it tricky is purely the time constraints. And I think that, yes, if you had an extra 5 minutes, it would be trivial to say, okay, these are all the things, and now we all work together and do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, on this making it trivial. If you have some time to do it, for example, I think it's really true. Many of those games, they would be very or much easier, I guess, if you had all the time or something like this. Yeah, I agree. Definitely agree.
And Pandemic Rapid Response is another shout out. That's something
No, I
that
haven't played this.
I haven't played it either. I'm just actually, that's one that I'm definitely keen on checking out. Why is that all blue? There we go. That's the way the cover actually looks, and I will be looking that up. And yeah, tabletop rhythm games, which have been
Your
mentioned.
screen is not showing to me, Baz. Are you?
Can everyone else see Pandemic Rapid Response on the screen? Let me know. Hopefully it shows to you. Yeah, Xate sees it. And Xate also wants to say, express love for Turksy, although totally uninterested in Kitchen Rush. I guess, the dexterity elements, there is a lot of maneuvering, but Turksy, sure. Yeah, not quite, but you do definitely matter. Lots of love. And thank you, Gran, for confirming that it shows to Tabletop Gran. And yeah, talking about rhythm action games, I do think that most rhythm action games are very much performance based. And I think that's how I would differentiate it. Things like Grabble, which is my own game. I'm going to keep using my own games when I can. Why the heck not? And which is fundamentally, sure, you can be looking at it and thinking ahead and thinking, okay, I'm going to grab that. But while my hand is going for it, it's also looking at the next card, if you know what I mean, and scouting out for when to change. But it is performance based. You might be thinking in a rhythm action game, in a video game, how do I put my legs here? But it's basically about how do I do this? There's one clear way to do. Lots of love, Board Game Gran, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks for coming.
Even, because I guess it's very late for you. People who live in New Zealand or Australia, obviously, different time zones. That's the majesty of the world. And even sets, which is a complex thing to think about, or space alerts, it feels very performance-based. But then we've got the things where it's, even a game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergies, that one, I think that's, okay, sure, it's only 2 minutes, but you are actually thinking, okay, I've got this, I've got that, should I take that? Should I get rid of this? And even if you had all the time in the world, I'm not sure it would be 100% obvious. And I think that's the key thing, that it would be less interesting if you had all the time in the world, but I don't think it would be super obvious. And certainly, when you get to Kitchen Rush or Hyperwars, what I love about it is that there's not much as a competitive, especially as a multiplayer competitive strategic game, there's not much like it. So, we are out of time, but I want to ask you some super quick questions, because this is a speed game after all, Fabricio. Before we
I have a quick question for you as well. First, Bess.
Ask.
Do you know any speed game, strategic or not, that has the flicking mechanism?
Oh, none of them come to my mind. You mean where you're allowed to flick, but you can keep flicking as quickly as you want?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
No, I don't know that.
I have designed a
that
game like
myself.
that, but I haven't heard of. I designed a game like this. It's about pizza, and you have to flick your ingredients to make a pattern on the board. And if you do it faster, you're gonna occupy the main areas of the board first than other players. It's not really very strategic. It's much more dexterity based, but it's a speed game as well.
Sounds cool. And hello, Yoda. It is lovely to see you. We're just coming up to the end of the show. And First question: why do we assume that strategic games? Why do we tend to assume any game is turn-based? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of how things have been done for a long time now. I think it's real time outside of the video game world is something that is much more connected to play or to sports than actually like tabletop games. I think this is one reason, but I think the main reason for, especially for the strategic ones, is that we tend to think of strategist people as people that think things through. So you take your time, you analyze the field, and then you decide which move to take, and this kind of stuff. And so I guess it kind of feels more like a uh, natural to assume that it's turn-based. If you think about, for example, volleyball is a sport that is turn-based, right? So every team have their own turn. That's why we say, okay, when you do something and you're expecting someone to
I don't
do
know volleyball. I don't know if I'd call that turn-based at all, because there's definitely a real-time aspect of you need to be there when the ball is there. I mean, if you're there 1 second late or 1 second early, it's completely inappropriate. So I think that any sport, by virtue of having the moving ball and having to make contacts with it, sorry, I think that's I'm not.
no, sure.
No, I see what you're saying with, okay, it spends a while on one side of the net, and it's not just about moving as fast as you can, and it does slow you down a
No.
little bit. I understand that what you're saying, but to say it's turn-based for me is a real stretch. That's like saying that Kitchen Rush is turn-based.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
Yeah, archery is absolutely turn-based. I mean, that's a good example.
Yeah, okay, it could be, yeah. But then,
Because
but
if
there
you
is
do your thing 5 seconds later or 5 seconds earlier, it doesn't matter as long as you make. Well, I guess
no,
if you
that's true.
take
That's
plus
true.
wind,
That's
but
true. Yeah.
but no, I think you're right that there is this bias in people's minds thinking, okay, strategy is thinking for long, thinking deep, and actually thinking deep and quickly can be just as much of a challenge, if not more. Because yesterday when we'd finished playing Wibble, everyone was like, wow, that really exhausted me. That was for them more tiring than whatnot cabinets or any of the turn-based things, because you have to always be on. And the next thing I wanted to ask is, what are the pitfalls of making strategic games speed-based? And I think one pitfall that we talked about is when there's nothing to slow you down, it can become just chaotic. I mean, Pits is a great game, but I don't know if I'd say it's really strategic, because in theory, you need something to slow you down. And a game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergies, you do only get to take 7 cards. So you will never get an 8th card. I mean, once you've got your 7 cards, that's it. So there's no point in going boom, 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 because then you'll have your 7 cards and you'll be showing everyone else, and there's not a massive advantage there. But
Yeah. So
yeah,
I think some of the pitfalls are, for example, in a speed game, you need to kind of limit how much someone needs to do to perform the game. It seems a bit unfair that the inability to be able to keep that many things in your head compared to like other players would be like a unfair or unbalanced game or something like this, which I think is rather curious because in turn-based games this happens a lot. There's a lot of games where there is like 10 systems and a lot of things are happening, and then your ability to keep these things in mind is crucial for your performance in the game. And if you do this in a speed game, it feels unfair somehow. So this is one. But I had another one in my mind and I just forgot it. Damn it. So I think this is quite interesting. this thing that you need to make the strategy as simple as possible, so people can actually think it through and don't be confused during the game, because this is kind of frustrating. I think it's really interesting. Oh, I remember the other one. The other pitfall is sometimes it's harder in speed games to be able to validate if someone is being honest, or if you can track back the movements and understand if the movement was valid and stuff like this.
Yeah, that's 100% a very big deal. And I think that there's definitely an aspect in most games that you need to assume people will be honest, but I think there's definitely an aspect of people might make innocent mistakes. And so I think this is where the level aspect of Hyperwars, saying you start with these simple rules, and once everyone's definitely doing that correctly, go to level 2. And so it'll take you 5 games at least to progress through all the levels. You encourage people to play every level at least once and make sure they are comfortable. Because if you are doing everything, I mean, that's fundamentally what Magic Maze does. I mean, you can't see off screen, but I think my copy is over there. And the levels of Magic Maze progress you through, adding additional things to do. I mean, some of the levels actually make it easier than the previous level, which always seems, but it's just a case of, hey, now you've got access to these character abilities. And if they started you off with all of that right at the start, then it would be uninteresting. But that whole game, it's about putting you at the point of confusion, making sure that it's simple enough for you that you can understand the rules and you don't make mistakes, but difficult enough that you're confused by all these different things going on and you're never sure what to do exactly.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
Now, moving on, what are the big opportunities? What with making a strategic speed game? I mean, for me, the big opportunity is that to expand like the potential of what's here, because there's so many things that could be done. I mean, sure, we've had worker placements, we've had cards that tell you to do things, but there's so many more ways that we could resolve mechanisms, and so many. I feel quite sad that no games have been published with Camelot's lightning system yet, except for Camelot itself. I mean, no more games, I should say, because it was introduced as introducing the lightning system. And when I went to Board Game Geek, I was hoping that there would be something else by Tom Jolly, but instead, that's like this glorious experiment that they never did again. And I would really, really, really love to see more games that are based around this aspect. So yeah,
Yeah.
basically it is an underserved niche, and I think it would be nice to have it. But what are there any opportunities that you can see or strengths or
Yeah,
what's
I think interesting opportunity with speed games is that you can kind of take the player out of their like comfort zone when dealing with some aspects. Maybe you don't have to do a full real time strategy game, but if you have parts of your game, if you can insert this mechanism in your game and make some parts of it more dynamic, more speed based. For example, if you have a game that is turn based, but you have a previous card selection phase where everyone selects card at the same time, and whoever finishes first or finishes last to get advantage or disadvantages or stuff like this. I think it gives you a lot of opportunity to like switch the balance of the game, like in a completely unexpected way.
yeah, something where there's a programming game where that part of it speed based, but then the resolution everyone's taking their time over it. And that's what actually fixes one of the weaknesses that you talked about, which is that,
Yeah.
okay, during the resolution, everyone's able to see how does this resolve, which I think is a fascinating idea. I mean, we could even potentially look at a card thing where you're selecting cards from your hand and putting them face down. And then maybe you need to work backwards. I mean, that's
Yeah.
if the
Have you
bottom card was the
have
last
you
thing
played
that you had to do.
have you played Robo Rally?
Yes.
Yeah, so this
But
kind
I
of
mean, in
mechanism
Robo
is
Rally, like, but the different. I mean, Robo Rally doesn't quite have. I mean, it's an interesting thing. Again, is that a speed game? Is it not? It's like rules as written. The last two people, one of them has some amount of time, but that's really just to make sure no one's taking a
yeah,
lot
yeah,
more
that,
time than
sure, sure,
everyone
sure,
else.
yeah,
So I wouldn't call like rules as written. I wouldn't call it a speed game. We did
no, me
house rule
neither,
it
me neither.
that okay, once the first person has done it, then they turn it over and everyone else has 1 minute. So that means that if one person's super fast, everyone else has to be at most 1 minute slower, which I think for that, okay, it adds a little bit of speed to it for sure. But also Robo Rally can do things in any order. I'm just thinking, yeah, putting down cards, your first card that you put in is the last one that you activate. So
Yeah,
you put down cards and then it's like the top one is the first one.
like
That would be an
stacking and then
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But you only get to put down in one order. But let's talk about lessons. What have you learned from making Hyperwars? And what would you do differently? What would you teach other people who are designing a speed strategy game?
Nice. I think that for me one of the key learnings was the reasons I ended up slicing it in different difficulty levels. There is one very interesting aspect of speed games, which is frustration. This can amount to like very very rapidly if you don't think about this. I have people that play like the very very first initial versions of the game that they were like, no, this is too frustrating, I cannot play this game. Like, of course I haven't split the difficulty in levels yet, so everyone was trying to do everything in their first game and obviously was not good, obviously it was super frustrating. So this is one lesson I definitely learned, and I would tell anyone wanting to make a speed game to have this learning curve in mind when designing your
Mm-mm.
games.
To make sure that there's some sorts of levels so that people can enter it at the most basic level and stay there if they want. Maybe that's enough for them. And
Yeah,
when you're introducing someone new to the game, you don't want to have all of these additional aspects. I think that's a
yeah,
really good lesson. And I love, yeah, we can't just be saying, okay, this is the Hyperwars thing, no one else can use it. We all learn from each other. I think that my own lesson is to make sure it's super intuitive and clear. And don't worry about having non-turn based bits because previously my game, a game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergies, it started off where it was kind of semi-real time. So everyone would flip at the same time and then, would grab if they wanted, but then if you grab it, that's one of your opportunities to grab gone. So you can only decide to grab so many times during the game, but then you wait for everyone else to grab and then it's like, okay, now we replenish the market. Now, 3, 2, 1, flip. And now, once we've replenished the markets, and the market is kind of in pairs of cards. So if you take one of them, you need to take both of them. So it's not just, this is one thing I want. And that was interesting. But having okay, we stop for a moment, now we pause. Think about why people are stopping. Think about why people are pausing and think about whether that feels natural. Because in game design, you don't want to fight human intuition. You want to go with it. And I think in a speed game, it's even more important because Bonanza, I mean, not shuffling your cards does go against human intuition, but the game is worth it because it facilitates so much. But if that was a speed game where you couldn't change the order of your cards, I think that would be more problematic because people
mm,
would be kind of more likely to make those mistakes under pressure. So I think with a speed game, it's even more important that everything is just super flying. And once it was like, you know what, just let's go full speed. Let's just have 9 in the middle, pick up a card, replace it, pick up a card, replace it, and do that like up 7 times. But it works so much better, and glad I went that way.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to say at this point?
I think that I just wanted to add that one thing I'm still to do, what I think it would be interesting, is to introduce more interaction in a competitive speed game. It's a very interesting challenge because, as you said, everything must be so clear, and there should be no space for doubt in a speed game. Otherwise, you like just stop playing or hinder the evolution of the game, the pace of the game. So this is something I have considered many times during development of Hyperwars, like how people could interact among them. And in the end, what I did was so they can interact, but as a sort of future plan. So during the 5 minutes, you can only plan to do something with the other players during the scoring time. And this is like the highest levels, like level 4 and 5, allows you to plan ahead to try and influence the scoring part of the game. So of course, this is a way to interact with the other players, but I'm still to find a interesting way to allow interaction in the real time part.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of design space left here, and I would love to see more designers taking up the mantle rather than just saying, in the same way that I think people are starting to feel not everything has to be competitive. Let's explore cooperative stuff a bit more, and that's becoming more and more common. Like we've got more and more cooperative party games, which is lovely. And I think that's how I would love to see more real time games exploring the possibilities of what there could be. And at this point, Fabricio, would you like to ask the question of the day? Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. Question of the day.
Right. So today I want to ask you something a bit different. Um, what is your favorite book, fiction book?
I'm going to say, give my regular answer. I do actually have an answer for this. The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. The Little
Say,
Prince.
say, say the name again. I didn't get it.
The Little Prince.
Aha. Okay.
It's
Yes. Yes.
written by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. Sure.
this is the story of a pilot who crash lands in the desert, and then they meet a little prince. And the prince tells a lot of stories about their time on the tiny little planet, a planet which is the size of like one room. And then the prince is walking around. There's such charming illustrations. Parts of what made me fall in love with this book, I'm not going to lie, are the pictures. I love the idea of tiny little planets. It's just so whimsical and charming. And then the prince flies off into other places, meets a lot of adults who have kind of committed several follies and lost touch with what brings them joy. I mean, from one perspective, it is just a book about whimsical, silly little stuff happening. From another perspective, it's a reminder to us as adults to not be distracted by the accumulation of wealth or the pursuit of power, but to really take joy in the moment, to value our friends, to value the things around us. And I think that for me, this is a book that it's a really short read. If you're an adult, you could probably read it in half an hour. And I would recommend it to anyone. If you haven't already gotten it, honestly, go out, get it, ask your library for it, or even buy a copy and read it, then give it to someone else. It's a lovely present. And
Yeah. It's
yeah,
lovely. This book is so amazing. Yeah, I agree.
Le Petit Prince,
La
as it
Petite
was
France.
originally
Exactly.
called in the French
Yeah.
version. Um, yeah, to all the other people out there, what is your favorite book of fiction? Do you have a favorite book? And I am curious, as is Fabricio. At this point, I want to also ask over to you, what are you up to? You can share Botany if you want to. I mean, I'm personally going to do a bit of postage, a bit of tidying up, a bit of writing down stuff and painting stuff for 3 games that I'm making between now and the end of the year. So I'm going to also possibly be doing a bit of other painting for other stuff that I'm making, hopefully before the end of the year, although not it's not specifically for a convention, but hopefully it will get out. And I'm going to work out what I'm playtesting tomorrow. That's pretty much me. And Fabricio, what are you up to?
So today and tomorrow, most of the things I'm going to do is based on the campaign, of course. So I'm going to be sending a lot of emails, contacting people, trying to make like people go there and check the page and back the game. But I'm really eager to get some game on the table as well. I want to have my friends over and play some stuff during the weekend. And I definitely need to do some cleanup in my house because I've been doing only board game stuff for the last 4 or 5 days straight. And I have 5 cats. Yeah, they can trash your place pretty quickly. So I need to do some cleanup as well.
And talking about books, Xate says it changes over and over. Currently, don't really have a favourite one. Haven't read any good fiction in ages. Sorry to hear. But yeah, 5, asks Xate.
5.
Recap and wrap up before we finish up. So I think we chatted about launching a Kickstarter, the emotional rush within it. We chatted about a whole bunch of games that I played last night. Chatted about the joy of blending together real-time strategy games. We chatted about a whole bunch of games, including Pit, a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your beetroots or radishes or turnips. Camelot with the turn counters passing by. I'd love to see something like this come out again. Rush MD and Kitchen Rush, of course. A game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergies, which once the second edition comes out, I'm really excited to hear what people will think, because the first edition did have some slight balancing issues, but Escape, Curse of the Temple, Space Alert, which I decided, in my opinion, is more of a performance-based game than a strategic game. Hyperwars were I'm certainly excited. Fabricio is certainly excited. Hopefully, you're also excited. 5-minute Chase, Flats Line, which I've not played, and Fuse, and briefly mentioned Pandemic Rapid Response and Pendulum. If there's anything else that you think should be on the list of games to look at, I would be very interested to hear. But I mean, that's still hardly any games. I mean, for that to be all the games that we could possibly bring up, that's nothing. And so, in conclusion, I think, yes, there are potential pitfalls. There's a potential pitfall of the chaos, of fatigue, of tiredness, and of people making mistakes, of people not being able to check it. But there's the massive gap. There's just not enough real-time strategy games. And I think that's, hopefully we'll agree with that conclusion. And
Definitely, I will. Yeah. Well, I need to do more of those. I really enjoy making them. I must say that I was not a huge fan of real-time games when I started designing Hyperwars, but I really got into this type of game. It really amuses me now.
And Xate says that is there a 3D printer? And apparently that is more fun than 5 cats.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you can try to mix them up. Maybe the cats and the 3D printer, like printing crowns or stuff to put on their head, or I don't know, little shoes, stuff like this. Yeah, definitely mix them up is really cool.
If you want to check me out, I am obviously stuff by beds everywhere. And I really have to get my act together. I'm not going to lie. And the last couple of months, I have been pretty much constantly fatigued, and well, at least the last month. And episode 800 might not be as epic as it has been sometimes in the past for my episode 7 or 600 or 500 or 400. But check that out. There will be streams going forward. And Fabricio, where would you like people to check you out?
Just real quick, first, I'd just like to say that I was here with you on your show number 700, and I'm very close to the 800 now. So that makes me really happy. That's really cool. But you can find me and Dice Coalition, my company, in Twitter, on YouTube, um, all the major social media, Instagram, Facebook. Of course, you can also go to our website, dicecoalition.games, and you can look for Hyperwars right now on Kickstarter because you're going to find a really nice game there to back.
Mm. And obviously Fabricio is biased, but
Yeah, of course, yes.
but yes, check that out, and lots of love to you all. Please share, spread the word, and also I should also share, spread the word of my own Kickstarter, which for those who don't know is games about stuff. So it's 4 games about a game about drawing creatures, complementing the drawings and complementing the complements. A game about counting cats, shapes, and colors that keeps getting trickier. A game about quickly matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures. And a game about cute comical creatures and trying to identify them after some mixed noises. So these 4 games are going to come in little boxes. And hopefully that will be something that people want to engage with. But yeah, check out both of those things, and congratulations on getting almost 10% of the way. And I wish you all the best for the remainder of your Kickstarter. But now, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Fabricio, for being here. Thank you,
Thank
everyone
you,
else,
Beth.
for your lovely comments and questions. And the only thing left to say, as always, is bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Do, 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 bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go to bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye, everyone. And I hope you have a lovely day. Bye, bye.
Bye.
Bye, bye, Fabricio.
Bye bye, Beth.